Today, we're talking about one of the most fundamental and core pieces in face-to-face fundraising, your pitch. This is what you use to not only inform people, but inspire them to support, to donate, and to make a difference. Hey guys, and welcome to the episode. Wow, there is a lot to talk about when we're talking about a fundraising pitch, and there's lots that I want to share with you. And so I'm going to be creating another little series on your fundraising pitch. I want to explore things like pitch construction and structure, what that looks like, how do we develop a really powerful pitch, and then I also want to talk a lot about pitch delivery. You can craft a magnificent pitch, but if you can't deliver it well, then it often doesn't reach its full potential. And if you know anything about communication, you'll know that most of the power of our communication comes through our use of body language, but also comes through our use of tone. And so I want to show you some tips and tools and tricks on how you can deliver a pitch really, really effectively. So with that said, let's get into this episode. And in this episode, I want to talk a bit about pitch structure. And I also want to give you probably the most fundamental tip that I possibly can on not only developing, but delivering a really great pitch. And so I'll talk about that near the end. But if we talk about pitch structure to start, what does a pitch look like in terms of its general structure? Now I'm going to share with you the structure that I use. I don't think this is the best structure or the only structure. It's just the way that I talk about it. If you watched my video on the 3 stages and 6 steps in the fundraising process, 3 of those steps are on the pitch. And so when I'm thinking about a pitch, I'm thinking about a story, a narrative. And any good story has 3 basic parts. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. Right? It's got an introduction, it's got the meat of the story, and then it's got some sort of conclusion. And so I think of a fundraising pitch in a similar way. So let's talk a bit about these 3 elements. So the first part of our pitch, the beginning, is what I call the introduction, because it is exactly that, right? We're introducing the cause, we're introducing the mission and the impact that the organization is trying to make. It's a fairly broad picture of the organization, but this shouldn't be a dry, boring sort of intro. We want to make this as interesting, as intriguing as possible. In marketing terms, you might call this the hook, right? It's the thing that gets people to want to find out more. So if you work for an organization that's not very well known or has maybe some unique points, has some unique aspects to the way that they work, it's a really good idea to add these into your introduction. If you work for a very well-known organization, you might want to try and find some aspects, some elements, some pieces that people might not know about the organization. I think this can work really well, particularly if it's very well known and people generally have a good idea of what the organization is doing. But you ultimately want to create an introduction that is something that is punchy, that is interesting, that is not too long. Now, I will be creating a video on pitch development, on creating a really powerful pitch. But in this video, I just want to give you an overview of the structure. The next part of our pitch is the story of impact. This is the meat of our interaction. Stories are incredibly powerful at motivating people, of communicating messages. As a human species, we are very story oriented. There was a study that showed that 65% of all our communication is story based. As a human species, since the beginning of time, we've been telling stories, whether this be through cave paintings or stories that pass from generation to generation. This is how we communicate meaning most effectively. And so for your pitch, you really want to have a story that you're able to talk about the type of work, the type of projects and initiatives people would be supporting. Now, the reality is charities do lots and lots and lots of different work, and the worst thing you can do is overcomplicate your story of impact with lots of different threads from lots of different initiatives. You really want to keep this as simple as you possibly can. When we have an overload of information, we actually find it hard to make decisions. So for instance, at the moment, I work for a conservation charity part-time, and I still do some fundraising just to keep myself in the game. And I talk about wildflower meadows and the decline of these habitats. So in the UK, there's been a massive decline, a 97% decline in 85 years. And so that's the focus. But I also have some threads, some strands of sort of climate change, and I also talk a bit about pollinators. So there's a few different sort of strands in it, but it is essentially just about wildflower meadows. When I worked for a development organization, a sponsorship-based program, I talked about the story of one child in one community and the story of their experience before and after the charity was involved. And so keeping it to one story, one key theme, and making it as emotive and sort of story-oriented as possible is going to be probably the most effective thing you can do. And it also makes it enjoyable and engaging to listen to. So we'll get much deeper into this when we talk about developing a pitch, but that's the bulk, the meat of your pitch. And then finally we have our conclusion, our call to action, which is really where everything comes to a head. We can give a great intro and a great story, but if we don't ask effectively, everything can fall apart here. And so I see a great call to action as having two basic parts to it. The first part I call empowerment, giving people the power to act, really showing them that this work can't happen without people like them that support. Some fundraisers like to use urgency here, which can work also really well. I prefer empowerment for some reasons I won't go into in this video, but essentially, we're highlighting the importance of taking action, and then we're going to go into our actual ask, our close, where we're going to be specifically asking. What's really important about your call to action is that you're able to deliver it confidently and assertively each and every time. We want to be consistent in the way that we deliver this. This is where our nerves often rise, right? We know this is where it all comes to a head, and this is where really the outcome of the conversation happens. And so being able to deliver it really well, regardless of whether or not you think they're going to join and support, is really important. So super important to know your call to action really well and to deliver it really consistently each and every time. And so that's the way I see the structure of a great pitch. As I mentioned, I will be creating some content just dedicated towards actually developing a pitch. This can all make sense, but you might be asking yourself, okay, what do I actually do? What does a great intro look like in practical terms, or a great story, a great call to action? And I want to take you through some of those elements in some other videos that I create. And lastly, I promised I would give you one of the most fundamental tips for delivering a great pitch, and that is practice. Not just simply practicing, but actually writing out your pitch, whether that be on paper or digitally, and then learning it verbatim, learning it super, super well. And the resistance I get from this is, well, isn't it going to sound robotic or inauthentic or scripted? Now, that would be the case if I gave you a pitch and said you have to learn this because it's not your own words. But I'm talking here about crafting your own message. Think of it like giving a speech, right? You're given a period of time to give a wedding speech. You're not going to get up on stage and just wing it. Okay, I've got this amount of time and I want to be as effective as possible. I want to give the best speech I can. And you're going to sit down and you're going to write that speech, and then you're going to learn it. And it's not false or inauthentic. It's probably more true than if you just got up on stage and just said whatever came to your head, because you're actually going to be thinking through what you really mean, what you really feel, a particular story that you think was really interesting or impactful. And so you're far more effective when you do this. And maybe you take a pitch from someone else that you really like their pitch, and then you rewrite it in your own words, or maybe it's you create your own from scratch. It doesn't really matter, but if you have a pitch that to you encapsulates the message that you want to share, and then you learn that really well, you can even go off piece during your pitch. You don't have to say it verbatim. It's like actors as well, right? They learn a script and then they improvise along the way. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to stick to it, but knowing your pitch really well is going to allow you to spend a lot more of your mental capacity on the way you're delivering it, right? The speed, the pitch, the volume, the pauses, the emphasis that you're using, right? Knowing the words that you have to say is going to really free your mind up to think about the way that you're saying it. It's going to allow you to stay connected to the person you're talking to, rather than being in your head constantly thinking about, oh, what's the next piece? What's the next thing I want to say? And so definitely the most important part of delivering a great pitch is knowing it really well. And ultimately, you give your pitch so many times, each week, that it gives you the ability to not only, learn it and say it really well, but improve it, right? Imagine you gave a speech, 100 times. Each time you gave it, you could make little tweaks and go, oh, this didn't really work as well. This didn't really land. That joke didn't go down so well. And you make those changes as you go. And ultimately, you eventually come out with a pitch that is really effective and really powerful. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was helpful. If you like this content, please share it with a fundraising friend or colleague, and subscribe. That would be really, really amazing. But yeah, until the next one, stay inspired and keep fundraising.